The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
Welcome to Garden Connections. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Today we're going to start in a stunning Woodlands garden. Sharon Vandenorth and Lee Knight have a beautiful garden. They also have addressed some challenges of walnut trees and a very steep slope. I think you'll love what they've done. We're also going to get another recipe from Chef Larson, and we'll be traveling to Winona to the C.A. Rohrer Rose Garden. We're going to learn how to take care of roses. I hope you'll stay with us on Garden Connections. Well, it is a lovely, peaceful day to come visit your garden. Thanks for inviting us out.
Well, thank you very much for coming up.
We're
thrilled to have you here.
Serene and quiet, and you can hear the birds chirping and the water flowing. This is beautiful.
Well, thank you.
So how long have you guys been here?
Well, we've been here for about 13 years and have been working on the garden from day one.
From day one. Now you are on a fairly steep slope, which presents some challenges and some opportunities. What's the hardest part about working with this kind of landscape?
Well, there are a number of things. One, it gets very slippery. So I've ended up on my back end more than once. But it's water management, making sure that we get plants in the landscape that actually grip and keep soil from eroding.
Okay, strong root system.
So we need a strong root system, yes. And finding things that can not only live but thrive in kind of shallow topsoil, because we're in a very rocky clay hill.
It's not
here.
like deep loam and they can send down deep roots.
No,
right.
no, they have to want to survive.
To be a little
here.
tenacious here.
Yes.
Okay. Very peaceful, very beautiful. You've got a number of different varieties of plants. What have you got here, and what works well?
Well, what works really well in this particular application are bog bean. Those are long plants. They send out long tentacles, and it gives the pond some cover. We're a fairly shallow pond, and so in order to keep the algae at a minimum, having something that creates a lot of coverage. I have water hyacinth. They're called an oxygenator. They have a long water root system, and they help cleanse the pond. We have some hornwort, if you see that kind of green fairy-like floating plant, that's also an oxygenator.
Oh, okay, sure.
That helps the fish, the koi in the pond, and the goldfish and other species, and it helps also keep the pond clean.
And are these cattails here?
They are cattails, and I'm thrilled this year because we have our very first catkin. We actually got a little, if you can see that little brown spot in there. So those are a native plant. And
do they take a long time to establish? Is that why you're so excited about that this year?
Well, this is the first time that we've actually had a bloom or a catkin on the plant, and it's been a couple of years. So
now I see you have this kind of tall, spiky with the red blossoms on it, and you've got that in several places around here. What's this one called?
Well, this is actually a Minnesota native. It's a lobelia, and it's called red cardinal flower. And it's a great pond plant because it likes its feet wet, and it attracts hummingbirds and butterflies. Oh, nice. And one of the reasons that you see it in many places around the pond is because birds like to come and they move the seeds around.
Okay,
so I started.
It naturalizes almost.
Naturalizes, yes.
Right.
And it's hardy.
And very hardy. Also important. Well, you had mentioned to me earlier that you've been doing some battle up in the woods, kind of reclaiming some territory. Let's go see what you've done addressing some other challenges that people find in their yards.
Absolutely.
Boy, you really come up quite a bit here, don't you?
Yes, it is. It's a great view of the pond from this angle.
Oh, it sure is. It sure is. And you've got some lovely shade up here. but from walnut trees, which is a challenge sometimes.
It's a significant challenge. Walnut trees are beautiful and they have great winter interest because they have beautiful bark and great gnarly limbs. They're also toxic to so much plant life, and so it is really a lot of testing to figure out what you can actually grow under walnut trees. And you look to nature. You go in the woods where there are walnuts and see what's growing underneath them. But what walnut trees are really host to are a lot of invasive species.
Oh, okay.
So
what have you gotten, and are you keeping those because they work with walnuts, or are you removing them?
well, I'm trying to push back a little bit. We live in the woods. We chose to live in the woods.
Okay. So you're going to work with it a little bit?
We have to work with it. It's all about compromise. So I am pushing back a little bit, and some of the things I'm trying to incorporate into our landscape, like this Engelmann ivy, which grows wild. You can see it growing up the walnut trees and throughout the woods. But I'm trying to keep it out of my garden area, and so I've tamed it.
On your fence.
I've tamed it to grow on the fence.
Well, let's take a look. You've got a section where you've kind of reclaimed some of that space
Yes.
and planted some of your own things. Let's go take a look. So this area is a little more formalized, slightly. So what are some of the plants that you put in here by your choice rather than wild in the woods?
Well, things that grow well under black walnuts. So we have a Minnesota native. This is Sambuca. It's an elderberry. It gets a beautiful bloom in the spring and birds love it. We have ashleaf spirea, which is a hardy shrub. Dicentra, which is bleeding hearts, and you can see they're starting to go dormant. But they're one of my favorite spring plants, and I let them go dormant in the garden because I love the color. We have lots of different varieties of hosta. I have a good friend who's helped me a great deal in my garden. I've learned a lot from her. Different varieties of hosta, and they seem to do fine under black walnut. And toad lilies, which is a beautiful sweet flower, comes in the fall, and anemone, which is a natural Minnesota, a native Minnesota. So we have a wide variety. We're testing some things, but
A little trial and error is always a good thing.
Trial and error.
And here we are in the side yard, and this looks like perhaps it's the most sunny part of your yard.
It is. It's the sunniest part in our woodland garden.
And you've used that opportunity to put in a little color.
Yes, and coneflower, echinacea, which is a prairie plant, does really well and in this environment, and we attract lots of butterflies and lots of bees, and we're really trying to keep our bees healthy.
Yes, that's important. What are those big leafed plants down in the front?
That is an interesting plant. It's kind of prehistoric looking. It's
It is,
Ligularia, and it sends up a beautiful fall daisy-like bloom in early into late fall, and so it's a nice splash of golden color at that time of year.
Great. Got blooms all year round then.
Yes.
Sharon, one of the things I really like about your garden too is that you are incorporating some visual interest beyond plants, and this bench is a perfect example of that. It's very whimsical.
It's fun, isn't it?
It is great.
It's really one of our favorites. It has great winter interest as well because it's out here year-round and against the snow. It's really beautiful.
That would be.
Would you like to sit down?
Sure, let's do that. It's very artistic too. Did you have someone make it for you?
No, I actually found it, and it was one of those things where I couldn't pass it up.
Oh, lucky you. And art is great in a garden. It just adds another layer of interest.
Absolutely. I think it's really important, and it's a great way to showcase new things in your garden.
Very good. And this is just so tranquil and so relaxing, so peaceful. Thank you so much for inviting us to be
Well,
out
thank
here.
you for coming. I'm glad you find it that way. That's really our goal, is to create this kind of oasis.
Well, you did a good job.
Well, thanks.
While we sit here and enjoy this beautiful garden, coming up next is a great recipe from Chef Stephen Larson.
Hi, I'm Chef Stephen Larson. Welcome to my kitchen at Quarter Quarter Restaurant here in Harmony, Minnesota. Some garden produce gives us 2 ingredients for the price of 1. Beets, as we're going to show you today, are used for both their greens and their roots. The first recipe I'm going to do is a black velvet cake, cupcake actually, that uses the beet root as a part of the ingredient. To start that, we need our dry ingredients. So what I have in the bowl here already is some flour, sugar, and a good shot of cocoa. And I'm going to use the food processor for this. But you could certainly mix this by hand if it's easier for you. We'll give those a quick spin, just until they get well mixed. We also need to add some leavening. We've got some baking powder, baking soda, and a bit of salt. We'll get that stirred in. Then we need to add our wet ingredients. I have here a cup of buttermilk. I also have half a cup of vegetable oil. Two large eggs. And 1 cup of cooked beet puree. So again, we'll give that a quick spin just until it comes together into a batter. Give it a quick scrape down. And we're good to go. To make things a bit easier, I'm going to use this water pitcher to fill my muffin pan with. And I'm not going to need all this because the recipe makes 24 cupcakes, and I'm just going to fill 12 for right now. So here we have our lined cupcake pan. Now that we have those all filled, I'm going to pop them into a 350-degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes or until a pick comes out clean. So here I have a batch that I've already cooked and cooled because, of course, they're going to need to cool before you put the frosting on. And I have some cream cheese frosting here in the piping bag because I want to make it look pretty, as I always do. And we're going to use that to beautifully decorate the tops. Kids and adults alike certainly aren't going to complain about eating their vegetables when they can have them in this form. Black velvet cupcakes with cream cheese frosting, because there's nothing better than eating fresh from your garden.
We're in beautiful Winona, Minnesota, and we're at Lake Park, more specifically the Dr. Rohrer Rose Garden. We're going to learn all about roses today, and our special guest is Kara Welch, who is with the maintenance department here for the city of Winona, and it's her job to take care of all these roses. Kara, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Stephanie.
This is a beautiful garden, and it's very large. How many roses do you have?
We have about 500 bushes.
500, that's a lot. That takes a lot of work. What are the varieties that you have here in the garden, or just name a few?
Okay. With tea roses, we have the Chicago Peace, the Peace Rose, Double Delight, and quite a few more. Our main rose is the tea rose.
Is the tea rose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And roses have a habit of being known as a very difficult plant to grow. Do you find that to be the case, or have you worked with them so long you've got it down pat?
Each year there is things that bring up new troubles and new problems, depending on the weather, bug infestations, things like that.
Okay. Okay. Now this garden has been in Winona for how long? And who is Dr. Rohrer?
Dr. Rohrer began the garden. He was part of the Winona Rose Society, and he was a dentist here in Winona. And back in 1951, he persuaded the Rose Society to donate 50 roses to the Winona Park system, and that's how the Rose Garden began.
Wow, and it's really grown since then. Well, as we said, roses have a tradition of being known as a little bit of a challenge, but you're going to give us some helpful hints. And let's start by having you demonstrate to us pruning. Pruning is really important to roses. Why is that?
You want to keep and maintain the shape of the rose bush, and how you prune helps do that. With the healthy airflow going through, that'll help combat some of your other troubles too, like the black spot that we see here.
Okay.
When the flowering is finished, you want to go down the stem to the first set of 5 leaves.
Okay,
so I can count my leaves here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you always want to prune to the outside portion of the rose bush. That'll help it keep its good shape.
Okay.
Because the next bud is going to stem from right here.
From right there. So we've got 3 leaves here, 3 leaves here. This is the first set of 5. And show us where you're going to take that cut.
At a slight angle just above where I see the leaf attached to the stem there. You don't want to take a severe angle, but just a gentle slight angle.
Okay. Great. And it's very important, I understand, to remove all the debris that you've taken.
Yes.
From
you want
the
to get
roses.
rid of the debris that'll help keep the bugs down and the funguses down that you're trying to combat.
Okay, so you get rid of that as well. And so then that leaves a shape like this. Now, spent blossoms, do you have to prune those as well?
Right. You want to keep those off because that'll help bring your bush back and help it grow again. So here we have a little stem. I'm going to get rid of that and prune that off.
Okay. And how often should you prune your roses? Every time they bloom? Because your roses here at the garden bloom several times throughout the season.
Right. So I'll go through every week or so and take off the dead blooms, and that'll help promote constant color in the garden and keep the garden blooming and new buds coming out.
Okay, so here's another one, and if I look for my first 5, that would be this one.
But now that one's on the inside of the bush.
Ah, okay.
So you want to look for the outside.
And so this one is on the outside. And may I?
Yeah.
All right. Slight angle, and I'm going to take it above.
Right.
Okay, let's see if I can do this without wrecking your bush. About like so?
Maybe coming, yep, at a very slight angle.
Like so.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Looks good. And you would do all of these branches?
Right.
How long do you need to wait until the flower is spent? I mean, is this one considered over?
It's getting done. It's getting close. If I touch it and the petals start to fall off, then I kind of know it's done.
It's ready to be done. Is there a detriment to the bush if you trim it too soon before the flower is done?
No, you just lose that color and it'll spry up and it'll start to grow again.
Okay. You mentioned airflow through the bush, and that helps combat some of the diseases that roses are susceptible to.
Yes.
What are some of the most common diseases? And I see we've got an example of one on this particular bush.
This is black spot. It's inevitable. Roses are going to get black spot.
They just will.
And it's earlier this year because we had such a mild winter. The winter was really unseasonably warm.
Okay. And that's not good for roses.
It helps promote more of the funguses that we're trying to combat.
All right.
So I want to get rid of that.
Black spot is a fungus. Does it rub off if you touch it?
Nope, it's in the leaf.
Nope, it's just...
But it will spread to other leaves on the plant
Okay.
and other bushes in your garden. So you want to try to get rid of that.
So you try to remove that. So if you see a leaf like this, or I see there's some underneath here, and there's even a little bit on this one.
Right.
How much do you want to take? Do you want to take it all, even if it makes your bush look a little bare?
Sometimes I do. I don't know if you noticed, but when you touched that one, it fell off.
Yes,
so
I saw that.
Yeah, so I want to get rid of that and pick that up off the ground. So I'm going to cut this one right off from the tree because it's so infested with that. And if I see any on the ground, I want to pick them up and get rid of them too.
Okay. And does that apply with the petals as well? Because that'd be quite a job if you had to pick all of those up.
It's good to keep your garden clean, but mainly the black spot leaves you want to get rid of.
Most important. Okay. All right. And so there is quite a bit on this particular plant, and you would take it all?
Yeah, I would take most of it off.
Try to snip a little bit over here.
New leaves are going to sprout from there and grow. You're not killing your bush. So it'll just bring up new growth.
All right. Well, we're going to leave this bush for now, and you're going to show us another technique for combating some of the unusual pests that have been showing up in our area recently. So let's go check this one out. So here is a beautiful pink one that looks like it's about done.
This is a shrub rose.
Okay, and how is that different?
It's just more of a bushy rose versus the tea, which was the taller, straighter stemmed rose.
And are the flowers any different, or you have...
They're more of a cluster, more of a bouquet.
Okay, all right. And I see, you know, we were just talking about pruning. You've got rose hips
Yeah.
forming here as well. Do you leave those on the roses?
Not this time of year. We want to cut those off this time of year to
Okay.
promote new growth and new blooms.
Okay. So with rose hips, what is the rule for taking
Well,
those off?
because this is a shrub rose, it's not necessarily going to have the 5 leaves.
Okay.
But I'd still cut on the outside portion of my bush to promote that good growth and that good shapely bush.
Okay.
So I would cut right about in there.
Right about in there.
Yeah.
And we're going to take these are just a little round.
Some people leave
Pieces.
them on in the fall because they'll turn a bright orange and it'll be more of an ornamental.
Kind of ornamental, yep. And here's another one right in
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Now, this is the last one down, so you take it
Yeah.
about here.
See, there's a little bud coming out there, so I might go further down on this one, maybe to here, or sometimes even as drastically as
Oh,
this
really?
whole
You
section.
want me to take that whole section?
But there's a good bud coming out here, so let's cut here on this one.
Okay, about like so?
Yeah.
All right, and very important to have sharp shears when you're working with
Yes.
roses too.
You don't want to cut and tear and make a jagged edge. You want to get it nice in one
Nice
cut
and
if
crisp.
you can. Any more openings just encourage bugs and disease to
And
settle
disease
in.
to get in. Okay. Now we have right here on this flower right in front of you one of those pests that has
Yeah.
come into our area in the last few years, and as you can see, it's been really detrimental to the flowers. Tell us about this bug and what it is that it does to your roses.
Well, there's 2 here, but the Japanese beetle is the new invasive species that we're seeing a lot here in Minnesota that we didn't have before. It's migrated in from the East Coast and it's really become invasive. You can see how it's made a lacy pattern and just kind of sucked.
Poked holes in all of these flowers.
And it'll do that to your leaves. And if you see your leaves of your trees or your cane of lilies all laced up and holy, usually it's the Japanese
the culprit.
beetle.
So what do you do to get rid of these or to discourage these in your garden?
Well, they start as a grub. They'll lay their eggs down in the soil of your gardens.
Okay.
And then they start as a grub. And
The sooner you can get them, the better.
before they lay their eggs.
Okay,
Yes.
so you're going to show us one technique today
Yeah.
on how to do that, and my job is to dig a trench. Is
Okay.
that right?
Yeah, just a small little shallow. We only want to go down about an inch to 2 inches deep.
How close to the bush do you want to get?
Stay on the outside part of where the boughs.
Kind of the canopy? Okay. So
Yeah.
something.
Just real shallow. You can sprinkle it also on the topsoil and then stir it in about an inch or 2 inches deep.
And I see you have a little landscape fabric here. Do you work right over that
Yeah,
then?
I'm going to just go ahead and...
Okay. A little deeper, or is that good?
Nope, that looks pretty good.
Okay.
And then this is a systematic that we're just starting out. And it only takes just a tiny little bit. You don't need much at all. Just to sprinkle it in there. And then we're just going to cover up the topsoil again.
Cover it up again. You know, I tend to make holes with my hoe and I cover with my hands. I find that to be easier. So just cover it up like that?
And
Okay.
you'd go all the way around the bush.
The entire, just circle it completely.
Yeah,
Okay.
when you're doing this. And then after you have it covered up, you want to make sure that you water it thoroughly to soak
Okay,
it down
so we're
in.
going to put some water on there.
Because this is going to be absorbed by the plant's roots,
Okay.
and then it's going to go up into the plant.
This is one method. Are there any other options for folks who don't care to use chemicals in their gardens?
You can go through, they're a slow-moving beetle, so you can go
they're
through
catchable.
and pluck
Okay.
them off
All right.
and dispose of them. But you
Okay.
don't want to throw them back down on your ground. You want to remove them totally from your
Remove them
garden.
completely. All right. You've got one more thing that you're going to show us having to do with taking care of weeds in a rose garden. Let's go take a look at the other bed. So here is another beautiful bed. A lot of them spent already, finished blooming, at least for this first go. So we are going to take a look at this one right here, and you're going to show us about how to keep them healthy from a fertilizing standpoint. And this is a tiny one. Is it supposed to be that size?
Yes, this is a miniature. They're great for landscaping.
Okay,
Multi-bloomer and long-lasting.
Very delicate little flowers here. Looks great. All right, so we're going to put some fertilizer on there, and you've got just some general compost, manure-based
Right.
compost. Okay, what should I do?
Okay, we're going to make a trench. And when we do this, it's going to go all the way around the bush. But for today, we'll just make a trench close underneath the boughs of the
Okay,
of
so
the
same
bush.
thing, kind of out in what you'd call the drip line. Okay, and how deep do you want your trench?
About 2 inches.
About 2 inches. Okay, so pretty deep
Yeah.
here. About like so? All right.
And this is composted cow manure. It looks like black soil.
Looks great.
No odor or anything like that.
Okay.
And I just sprinkle it in. It's a nice natural way to fertilize. And
So not terribly thick. You'd
No.
probably take, what, 2 cups to go around this entire
around the
bush?
whole bush.
Okay. And then cover it up in water again?
Yes, we want to cover it back up.
Okay. Sounds good. Great.
Okay.
All right. And how often do you have to do that in the garden?
I usually do it once a year. You can do it twice a year, but you don't want to over fertilize because that will damage your plants. Too much fertilizer
Okay.
can burn and damage them too.
All right. Even though that it's well composted.
You want to just keep it to a minimum. The rule of thumb is to stop fertilizing your plants after August. At the end of August, you want to stop fertilizing and give them time to rest for the winter.
Before winter comes. You have another beautiful, I love this one.
Yeah.
What's this one called?
Magic.
Magic. Oh, that is just gorgeous. Look at these. Orange. It almost looks like it starts out yellow and turns red as it matures.
Yeah.
This is just great. Kara, you are a wealth of information when it comes to roses.
Thank you,
Thank
Stephanie.
you so much.
Thank you for
You've
coming.
really made a plant that a lot of folks feel a little intimidated about seem more doable. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom today.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's Garden Connections. I certainly have learned a ton about roses. I hope you'll give them a try, and I hope you'll join us again next week as we learn more about great garden tips that will help your garden grow. For Garden Connections, I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. On Garden Connections, we'd love to see photos of your garden. Or if you have questions for our garden experts, contact us by emailing garden@ksmq.org or like us on Facebook.